So we're talking tonight about the foundation of awesome leadership. Someone just rocked up in their car, so it could be someone for us. So I did a bit of a Google search this week around, I think I put awesome leadership into Google just to see what would come back. And pretty interestingly, I got these results. Now this is only from 10 articles saying, oh yeah, these are the 5 things that awesome leaders should be doing. And every kind of article added more and more and more things. And there was, just from the 10 articles, there was about 70 or 80 different things that awesome leaders should be doing. So I want to ask you, are we at awesome yet? And I think the answer to that is pretty overwhelming. I don't think we can look at that list and go, oh yeah, I'm just going to do that because, which one are you going to pick first? So the idea of today is to think about how do we kind of dig a bit deeper? How do we get to something that's more fundamental that applies across the board? So I've kind of put this diagram up as a bit of an illustration of a team of people. You're at a current state and you need to get to a goal. So current state on the left, a goal on the right, and we have a whole bunch of people in between. So the core group of people is probably the team of people who are going to be able to achieve the goal. So they're going to do some kind of work and some kind of structure, and there's going to be a leader somewhere. I didn't actually put them in, but that's all you guys. So we have a team who's in the middle, and we have a group at the bottom who are like customers and stakeholders, and I've made them kind of bigger because they're the most important kind of group that we interact with. At the top, we've got a whole bunch of kind of other people, like support people who kind of make the wheels turn and make things happen. Without those people, you'd probably actually struggle to get to your goal. So they're still very important to a leader. And this is kind of a map of all of the different elements of leadership, like where you need to be looking at things. So where you need to be thinking about, how do I influence these people, or how do I get buy-in from these people? How do I make a good product for customers? How do I keep stakeholders engaged? This is kind of your map of where you need to go. So, are we at awesome yet? I'm going to say, oh my God, because if you look at that, there's kind of no structure. There's like a map, but there's no kind of pointer about, there's like a you are here, but there's nothing about how do you get this group of people to achieve the goal. So I've gone down further again to 3 different points. The first one is strategy, the second one is people, and the third one is execution. So those 3 things, I think, encompass a whole bunch of detail and a whole bunch of things that we're going to talk about tonight, but I kind of summarized them into those 3 groups. So strategy is the process of defining the goal of where you want to head. So put that big yellow arrow in between. So this is about how do we get from where we are to where we want to go. So I think that the goals that you set are very important. You need to make sure that the goals align with a bigger picture. So the goals that you set need to, they need to align with where the business is heading. So the business are going to be, say, CEO level or the board level. They're going to be setting certain objectives for a company or a business or a venture. And they're going to want particular outcomes. So they might say, hey, we want to increase revenue by 30%, or we want to increase our customer size, or we want to go into this new market. So they've set this high level objective. And most of us here, I think, are not at the CEO kind of level. Some are, like AJ, he's pretty up there. But our job as leaders usually, but even the CEO has to report to a board, right? So even the CEO has to be able to fit their strategy in with what the board's saying is a good idea. We need to be ambitious with our goals. So it's important to set goals that are big. And the reason why is because there's a couple of reasons why. One is awesome reason is that when they achieve the goal, they're like, oh my God, I never thought I could actually achieve that. So that's like a massive motivation for people. And that's kind of thinking longer term. So when you're talking about strategy, particularly for people, which I'll cover in the next section, but strategy can even be thinking about what's going to come next. So think about the big goals, think about what it's going to look like when you get there, and think about how are we going to go to the next level. So that's kind of like this big picture thinking. At the same time, we need to be realistic about the goal. So it's not a good idea to pick a goal that's unattainable or impossible. So make sure that although it's a big goal and it would take a lot of effort to get there, but it is actually achievable and definable. And in the process of defining the goal, it's a good idea to bring the team into that. And the team, the reason why is because the team is going to bring a lot of buy-in to the whole vision. So if someone sets a strategy, so if you're a leader and you set a strategy and you go to your team and say, hey, everyone, this is the strategy, isn't it awesome? They're all going to go, what? Like, where did that come from? If they're not involved in the process of understanding what the thinking was behind it or how this lines up with what the CEO said last week, if they're not build buy-in into that process, then they're not going to own the end goal that is going to come out of the strategy session. So the visionary is also the leader's job. So you as a leader are the person to hold the vision of what's to come. And it's a good thing to use like pictures or to use stories or to use things that people connect with. So that means that in your mind, you're probably the person as a leader that has in your mind, I can see what the vision is going to look like. So as a part of setting the strategy, you're kind of imagining what things are going to be like in 12 months or 2 years or 3 years, depending on how long the strategy goes for. But in choosing that vision or in envisioning that, you also need to figure out how to communicate that to the team. So you're the primary owner of that, and part of your job is to make sure that the team knows what the vision is. And that can be, that's why I was mentioning like visuals and stories, because humans kind of connect with that. That's one really easy way to help people get onto the vision. And that kind of covers the last one, communicate and visual. So it's good, but that doesn't just apply to the vision, that also applies to the strategy itself. So once the team are talking about what the strategy is going to be, it's a really good idea to make sure that that keeps on happening. So if as a leader you kind of set the vision and set the strategy and then just let it ride, it's likely that the team might divert off into another area. Or when they're making decisions, sometimes they might need to be reminded of, remember this is a strategy, remember this is the vision, or even to challenge them. Does what you're talking about actually fit with what we discussed before? And sometimes that's happened, like I've been in teams where when I wasn't technically the leader, but kind of did some leadership-y things, myself and another person in the team were talking about a particular bit of work that we wanted to implement. And in that process, he was saying, we should do it this way. And I was saying, yeah, that's good, but I don't know if it actually aligns with the big vision that our leader, put forward. So maybe we should do it this way. Anyway, we went back and forth. No, I should do it this way, do it that way. Anyway, in the end, I said to him, look, let's go and ask the lead, the engineering manager, let's go ask him what option to go with. So we went to him and he ended up resolving it, and he resolved it because it lined up with the strategy. So it was good. We're waving at someone. Sorry? Oh, good. Good. So the second part is people. So people are, I would say, the most important part. And later on, after this kind of speaking time, we're going to all get together in groups and discuss it. So you can disagree with me if you want. That's all good. You can discuss it in the group. But as I said, I've put team as the first thing. So that's kind of where the first horizon is. As a leader, you're looking at your team, thinking about how to get this group of people to be working together. The second group is about customers, stakeholders, and the other support people, like I mentioned before. So this is kind of all broken out in a bit of a priority from the left to the right. So people are really important. And I would say one of the top things we need to do is to think about what's happening longer term. So when you're talking about strategy and setting a goal, usually you are talking kind of semi-long term. So you're talking, maybe this is 12 months out, maybe this is 2 years or 3 years. But I think it's important to think about people even further than that. Because, people are going to be in their career for like 40 years or something, so 50 years. And they're not always thinking about, what am I going to do for the next 50 years? But in reality, that's the reality that everyone faces, right? So as a leader, you have to be kind of aware of the context of what people are doing. So people are here to serve your vision as a leader and the strategy, but they're also there to worry about themselves. So as a leader, you need to be able to grow people. because people need to feel like they're achieving their goals. People need to feel like that this is a win-win situation. So I'm giving over my time to this company or this organization or to these goals and this strategy. But at the same time, I'm receiving more than just money, because money is just like, you need it to eat, but it's not always a big motivator for people. You also need to be, people are going to be thinking about, what's my career look like? Where am I going to head after this? Is this kind of goal that we're heading towards going to contribute to that? Am I using my skills in the right way? Am I growing? Am I learning? This is kind of the things that people are thinking about. So as leaders, we need to be able to grow and develop people. And I think it's one of the most primary skills that we need to have in practice. We need to be able to coach and mentor people, which is kind of linked in together with growing and developing, but it's just kind of like a proactive thing, I think. So growing and developing is like you're setting up some structure for people and you're encouraging people in the right direction, or you're helping them see where their skills are going to arrive to, or painting that picture of, after this project, you're going to have XYZ skills. Like, isn't that going to be awesome? But coaching and mentoring is more kind of proactive and happening in the moment. So in that sense, you're stepping in for people when they need you. And there could be all sorts of different things that happen that need that. Some of them might be kind of project-y type relation things, but some things might be people things or conflict. They're kind of opportunities to come in and help people grow as well. So I think too, one thing that's really awesome about people is seeing them achieve really awesome things. And as a leader, part of your job is to challenge people to say, hey, like, you're really good at this, but I reckon you could be better. Like, this is a really big strength for you. If you developed it, you could be this, or it could look like this. So not only are you, this is kind of looking at the goal setting or the strategy thing or looking forward, but you're not just doing it from a strategic point of view, from a team or objective. You're actually looking at that person and going, I think you could do this if you wanted to. Like, is that something you want to do? And if they say yes, well, it'll be awesome, right? Like, you can help them get there. You can challenge them. And part of that would be, when you're talking with them, you're kind of always putting that in front of them. And it's a big motivator for people, especially if they can see that, oh, I can do this, or yeah, like Dan believes in me, or I can have a go at this, and if I fail, it's okay. You kind of create this environment where you're challenging people and they're kind of striving for their potential. There's like got a massive benefit for teams and for companies, because having people at their ultimate potential is just amazing. And there's talk about, when you hire someone who is like in software engineering, they say, oh, this person's like a 10x developer, right? So they're like 10 times as productive or something, or 10 times as awesome as an everyday kind of developer. Well, in that mode, like if you could get everyone somewhere near the realm of 10x, like that's a massive win for companies and for your local team as well, what you're actually leading. So building trust is also something that's very important and sometimes like overlooked. Like it's not something that sometimes we talk about it. Like if you're reading things about leadership, it's talked about, but I think it's very important because it kind of builds upon how you're going to be influencing people. If people don't trust you, they might say, yeah, we believe Dan, we believe in the goal, it's all good. And then like they'll turn around and go, they'll kind of talk to each other and say, nah, Dan's an idiot. Like he doesn't know what he's talking about. So it's really important to build trust because not only they're kind of trusting that you've got the right strategy, you've got the right plan for execution. Like everyone in the team wants to be successful. Like everyone wants to be at their potential, everyone wants to be high performing, everyone wants to do awesome things for customers and deliver awesome products and outcomes. So your job as a leader is to kind of build that trust so that together you can kind of have this symbiosis where you can get there together. And your role as a lead is very important in reaching that. So building autonomy, I think, is very important. That's kind of, where you're letting the team have ownership. So, once you've set the strategy and you've kind of said, this is the way we're going to work and this is the way we're going to go, you don't need to kind of be in all the details after that. Sometimes you might be asked to come in and resolve a decision, like I was talking about with my mate when we were going at it back and forth. But mostly, if the team know the strategy, all those everyday things can be handled. the team know what it is. If you've painted that well for them and you've cast a vision well for them and they all understand and they're all aligned, then you can actually step back. And that trust element, I think, is important, key for that. But you can't be a blocker for anything. Like, you can't have all these requests come through you. You can't be there to resolve every decision or resolve every conflict. It's just not possible. It probably is possible. So I say not possible. It's not possible if you want to achieve some of those big goals. So it is probably possible to have a functioning team, but not particularly well functioning, where they do have to come to you to get things fixed all the time or resolved. But it's not going to achieve the big visions. It's not going to be a high performing team. I've put give generously there because I think this trust and this autonomy thing is kind of like, has this generosity attitude about it or approach. So in that, you're kind of saying, you're giving generously of your time, you're giving generously of your focus. People will know if, it's like there's a body language thing as well. If someone's talking to you and you're saying, we're talking about something important. So if someone comes to me and says, Dan, I really need help with this because I'm struggling. If I'm kind of thinking about, I've got this meeting in 10 minutes, I've got to get my thing ready, then they're going to know that you're kind of distracted or you're not really listening to them. So what's important for them, you need to kind of give your energy in a generous way, give your time, give your focus generously. And influence is how you bring all those people together towards the goal. Influence is like the glue that holds all those people together and pointing them all in the same direction. And influence, that won't always be the case. That's kind of like the ideal or the perfection part. But influencing and keeping on influencing and getting better at influencing means that all those people groups are going to be more and more aligned towards the goal. And that's where you want them to be. So when you're leading a team, influence is particularly important for the support teams and for customers and stakeholders outside of your team. So they're very important because it's harder to build trust with them when you're not kind of leading them, you don't have this kind of authority position. It's all based on influence. So in that, you have to get good at kind of figuring out what people need. Like if you're talking to someone in a support role in another kind of team, you can go to them and say, what can I do for you? Like, what would make you successful? So if they're doing sales or something, they're thinking about deals, they're thinking about what customers need, they're thinking about a whole different world maybe to what you're thinking about, unless any of you are in sales. But in that mode, you're thinking about a customer, you're thinking about deals, you're thinking about closing. And if you're, say, in a team that's doing, say, product development or something like that, then you need to go to that team, to the sales team and go, what do you need? Like when you're out with customers, how can we improve your success rate? Like how can we help you close better? How can we give you information or data or support, whatever it is? There's lots of different ways to pull that off, but it's really important, I think, to go and just say to people, how can I help you do stuff better? And that creates, I think, a whole new world of influence. So the third one is execution. And I've kind of illustrated there that sometimes it doesn't go, exactly from A to B. Sometimes there's a bit of a detour. That's okay. So in executing, I think we need to deliver value and deliver it often. It's really hard to build trust with stakeholders and influence with customers if kind of a team is tucked away in the corner of an office and no one hears from them for 12 months. Then they come out and say, hey everyone, we achieved the goal. Everyone's like, what have you been doing? Who are you guys? It's important that in executing, you are thinking about how can I deliver like a small piece of value to either customers or to my stakeholders or to whoever it is. How can I structure the work so that I can give them little pieces at a time? And then you can also help that, with changing direction slightly as well. So that thing where the execution's going up and down, you can easily adjust. If you start going off to one side, well, if you have that feedback, you can quickly kind of change direction a bit and correct. I've put delight, and delight means delight customers or delight people with little things. So one example with that sales kind of example, if you're talking to that support team and you're saying, what would be an awesome thing that I could do for you? if you could like deliver a little bit extra that maybe is not actually an obvious thing towards your strategy, but does a whole bunch of goodwill to bring another party into, it kind of helps influence and greases the wheels a bit. So if you can actually bring out something that's delightful for people, in like terms of customers and stuff, like if you've got a product or a software product, if you've got these little delight features, they're the things that kind of sell as well. So salespeople actually need that when they go out and talk to customers, because if they can identify what the customer really needs, and if they can do it in some exceptional way, the customer is going to think this is a no-brainer. Like, I need this. And it kind of creates this human element around work as well. So delighting people kind of connects people together. Like if you can deliver something a little bit extra that just totally rocks someone's world, then you're going to create like a fan for life. And then when you're moving forward or when you need to get something through, they might be there to support you and do a little bit extra for you. So innovate and experiment is a very important factor in our work, and sometimes you need to create space for this. So we might create a strategy and think, I'm going to head for this goal. But if you optimize everything for that goal and forget about things like innovation or experimenting or supporting people, you might achieve it, but after the goal's achieved, everyone will leave. Your whole team will go, nah, don't feel supported. We don't get to innovate, we don't get to experiment. Customers are going to get a kind of substandard kind of outcome. They might be happy with, we actually got something, but they're not going to be delighted. So innovation experimentation actually feeds into the delight part. So you can create a lot more delightful things if you're always innovating and experimenting. So I think it's a challenge for leaders to create space for what's important and maybe not urgent. So the urgent thing is kind of like, we're setting this goal and it's got a timeline, right? So we need to deliver this by this date. But if you hyper optimize for that and forget about things like innovation, it can actually like cripple companies as well. Like if you think about companies that didn't change stuff, like the company that companies that like used to deliver mail, right? Like there was a Western Union, right? Not so much mail, but they like shipped money out to people. So when like the world started changing, like now you don't even hear about them anymore. Like how do you send money to people? Gotta use PayPal or something, right? So in that world, they just didn't see it coming. There was someone the other day I was talking to who said that they heard a TED talk, I think, where a woman was talking about how she was working at, I think it was BlackBerry, and said, oh no, it was Nokia, sorry. They were working at Nokia and said, smartphones are gonna be the future. And everyone's like, smartphones. Who's gonna be using smartphones? Welcome. Hey, Ben, come in.
Sorry.
Who's gonna be using smartphones? Like, no one's gonna be doing that. We want real keypads. We don't want all this internet stuff on our phone. Like, we just wanna make calls and receive calls. Like, that's the function of a phone. Well, we kind of saw what happened to them when iPhone came out and just blitzed them. It proved that people actually did want nice touch screens and things they can touch, and do things like surf the internet in a really intuitive way. It's actually what people wanted. But without kind of this view of innovation and experimentation, they could have actually, if they had a culture where like they were bringing out phones all the time, but they were all kind of the same. They were kind of variations on the previous models a little bit. And their experimentation and innovation was very tight in this kind of one realm. If they'd really had an innovation and experimenting kind of culture, they could have proven whether this woman was right or not. They could have had the space available and said, okay, let's do like a fake phone made out of cardboard that's kind of got internet and all this stuff in it, and we'll go and show it to people and see if they really do want that. They could have kind of got a bit of a vibe to see whether customers were really asking for that. But they didn't, and yeah. So I've put as the last point to challenge everything, and also next to it to continuously improve. They kind of go hand in hand. So there are going to be things that are happening within your organization that need challenging. They might have been thought up because they were a good idea at the time. They might have solved a particular problem at a time. they might have been like really relevant for how big the company was at that time. But over time, companies grow, and if that process is still in place, sometimes it needs a leader to go in and challenge that. And challenge it in a good way. Like challenge it in a way that says, find out why we're doing that. Find out who the people are that need to influence that decision. Because there might be someone who really values that process and they need it to do their job. So if you just said, hey, we're going to change this, that person's going to freak out. They go, no, we're not changing that. I need that. But challenging is like going about it is saying, okay, well, I'll find out who that person is before I kind of announce that I want to change it, and go and talk to them and say, why do we do this thing? And you'll probably get an answer, and you can kind of work with them closely and collaborate with them and kind of figure out what the real driver is behind that, like what problem does it actually solve, and you'll be able to think about ways to solve it in a different way. So by challenging things, you get to continuously improve, and that's how companies like Toyota and Honda are like still around making awesome cars, because they developed that culture. And there are other companies like GM and Ford and stuff, and if you look at all the a lot of car companies actually all belong to like one huge car company now. So they all have different brands, but they're all owned by the same company because they all got consolidated. They all kind of, lost market share. Whereas Toyota and Honda and companies of that nature actually looked at this and thought, you know what, we can continuously improve this whole thing. So they took like Henry Ford's automation, assembly line, and they went and kind of kept improving on it. So they took what Henry Ford built, and they kept asking themselves, like, how can we make this faster? Or how can we do this better? How can we eliminate this part of the process by changing something like 10 steps back? And they continuously do it. And they ask their staff and the people on the assembly line, like, what can we do better? What's going too slow? What do you think we can change? And they'll float ideas up. And they have a culture of like embracing those. They reward people for those ideas, just for like the innovation ideas. Sometimes they don't work out, but they, instead of incentivizing like the outcomes of getting things faster and faster or improving, they actually incentivize the brainstorming part and the coming forward with new ideas and innovation. So companies like that have been able to offer cars still, and they're still like cars, they still have 4 wheels and a steering wheel and all that stuff. Most of them are very similar to each other. But what they were able to do was cut the cost of production, which meant their profit share increased. It meant they might have been more competitive in terms of pricing, but ultimately, like if you can, in a business, if you can increase revenue, great, but if you can cut costs, by the same amount, well, that's more money in the pocket for the company. So they were very successful at it and still are. So are we at awesome yet, after all that? Well, we're gonna break up into groups and discuss it.